I never imagined that a simple Monday morning could change my life forever. Every week, without fail, my husband would carefully place our 4-year-old's school bag in the corner of the kitchen. It seemed ordinary at first. The breakfast table was set, our child happily eating cereal, and he would linger near the bag for longer than necessary. It was subtle, almost polite, but there was something in his eyes, an unusual nervousness that made my stomach twist. Our marriage had always seemed perfect from the outside. We lived in a comfortable house in Maine. My husband was a successful professional, well-dressed, always organized, and meticulous with finances. He handled our accounts, our investments, and even our daily expenses with precision. People admired our life because it appeared calm, wealthy, and orderly. I never suspected there could be a dark undercurrent beneath that polished surface. It started as a small curiosity. I noticed that he had a particular routine every Monday morning. He would wake up early, make a cup of coffee, and then, before breakfast, approach the school bag. He never touched it casually. There was a precise method. He would unzip one compartment, pause, and remove something that was always hidden. I didn't know what it was at first. The bag seemed heavy, but I assumed it was books, a lunchbox, or toys. The first time I observed him, I simply smiled and assumed he was tidying our child's bag. It was not unusual for parents to pack extra snacks or small amounts of cash for emergencies. But then I noticed a pattern. Every Monday, like clockwork, he followed the same steps. Small, careful movements. Eyes darting toward the window as if checking for onlookers. His fingers trembled slightly. Something about his demeanor was off. One morning, curiosity got the better of me. Our child had been playing quietly while my husband went through the bag. I waited until he left the kitchen to take a call, and I carefully reached into the bag. At first, I felt fabric, small toys, and some papers. Then my fingers brushed against a thick bundle of something unfamiliar. I froze. I pulled it out slowly, and my heart dropped. It was cash, more than I had ever held in one place in my life. The stack was neatly wrapped, crisp, and bundled tightly. My hands shook as I counted it slowly, trying to make sense of what I was holding. $6,000. Cash. In a 4-year-old school bag. It had to be a mistake. Maybe he had hidden it there temporarily, or maybe there was some explanation that would make sense once he returned. But deep down, I knew that no ordinary explanation could justify hiding thousands of dollars in our child's backpack. Shock gave way to confusion. I questioned everything about our life, our marriage, and my husband. How could someone who appeared so responsible, so careful, take such a risk with our child? Was it just a one-time mistake or part of a bigger pattern? I needed to watch, to understand before jumping to conclusions. The instinct to protect our child outweighed every other thought. At that moment, I decided to observe him more closely. I did not confront him. Instead, I studied his behavior carefully over the following weeks. Each Monday, he repeated the same routine, carefully handling the school bag, inserting the thick bundle of cash, closing the compartment meticulously, and leaving for work with no sign of guilt. The precision of the act terrified me. It was deliberate, practiced, and consistent. I began documenting each occurrence. I noted the exact time he handled the bag, the method he used to hide the cash, and even small behavioral details, the way he adjusted his watch before zipping the bag, the subtle glances toward the street, the nervous energy that made my heart race. Everything about it screamed secrecy. The fear I felt was not just about money. It was about our child. What if someone noticed the cash? What if our child was accidentally exposed to danger? Every parent knows that feeling when they sense their child is at risk, even if the danger is invisible. I knew I could not ignore it. Despite my growing anxiety, I maintained the appearance of normalcy. I acted as if nothing was wrong, smiling at him in the mornings, helping our child get ready for school, and making sure that the house seemed calm. But inside, I was calculating, observing, and preparing to act if necessary. The sense of dread grew with each Monday. I began to realize that this was not a casual secret. This was a careful, ongoing practice, hidden in plain sight. The regularity of it, combined with the sheer amount of cash, hinted at something dangerous. I could not yet know the full extent, but instinct told me that discovering this could change everything. As the weeks passed, my unease became harder to ignore. Every Monday morning, I could feel it in the air before he even entered the kitchen. The way he moved toward our child's school bag was different from the rest of the week. There was a rhythm to his actions, almost ceremonial. He would pause, carefully unzip one small compartment, and slide something inside before zipping it back up. I could no longer convince myself that it was harmless. I tried to rationalize it at first. Perhaps he had borrowed the money for work, or maybe it was part of a business matter that required cash for deposits or tips. But each excuse I imagined felt increasingly implausible. I had access to all of our financial accounts. Nothing in our bank statements indicated $6,000 disappearing every Monday. My heart sank as the suspicion grew. Our 4-year-old was blissfully unaware of what was happening. They laughed and played, oblivious to the tension I felt in the kitchen. It made me love them even more and made my fear sharper. The thought that our child was being used in a secret I could not yet understand filled me with dread. I could not let any harm come to them. The innocent smile on their face every morning was a reminder of why I had to act carefully, thoughtfully, and decisively. I began paying closer attention to the way my husband interacted with the rest of our daily life. He seemed ordinary, calm, and loving, a devoted parent and partner. He still made the same jokes, helped our child with breakfast, and managed household tasks with an ease that disguised the secrecy of his Monday routine. This duality, the loving father and the man hiding thousands of dollars, terrified me more than the money itself. How could someone live two lives so perfectly at once? I started recording minor details that seemed irrelevant at first. The time he left for work, the small packages he occasionally carried, the sudden errands he ran on Mondays. Each note built a picture that made no sense until I considered the cash in the school bag. The pattern became undeniable. This was not a one-time mistake or an innocent habit. This was deliberate, calculated, and dangerous. My husband had always been careful with money. He balanced our accounts to the penny and was proud of his meticulous record keeping. The revelation that he could hide $6,000 in our child's bag without any paper trail shocked me. It challenged everything I believed about him, about our marriage, and about the safety of our family. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on me like nothing I had ever experienced. I could not confront him without knowing the full story, and I could not ignore it without risking our child's safety. My mind raced through every possibility, every explanation, every risk. It became clear that I needed a plan, a way to uncover the truth without alerting him. I watched him from a distance, pretending to busy myself with chores while noting every subtle movement. I memorized the way he zipped the bag, the precise angles at which he hid the cash, and the moments he looked around as if checking for witnesses. Each observation confirmed my growing fear. This was not harmless. Our child was being used as a courier in something far larger and more dangerous than I could imagine. At this point, I realized I had to prepare for the worst. The presence of $6,000 in a child's bag was not just alarming, it was criminal. The thought of exposing our family to legal or physical danger made my stomach churn. I knew that I could not approach him directly. The secrecy, the pattern, and the potential for danger meant that any confrontation could escalate and put our child at risk. I spent nights awake, imagining scenarios and planning steps to ensure safety. I started considering how to gather evidence, protect our assets, and keep our child away from harm. It was terrifying to realize that the person I had trusted most could be capable of something so secretive, so deliberate, and so threatening. The idea of a safe, ordinary life felt like a distant memory. Every Monday became an exercise in observation. I would wake early, make breakfast, and watch from a careful distance as he went through the motions. I learned the precise moment he inserted the cash, the way he pressed it flat to fit it into the hidden compartment, and the brief pause he always took to check for observers. The details were so exact that I could almost predict the next step before it happened. Despite the fear and confusion, a small part of me clung to hope that there might be a logical explanation. I wanted to believe in the man I had married, the father of our child, and the life we had built, but the evidence was growing too strong, and denial was no longer an option. The truth would reveal itself soon, and I had to be ready to act. Please listen to my story and tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong, because I knew that whatever I discovered could change everything about our family, our lives, and our child's safety forever. By the end of the first month, my anxiety had grown into a constant tension that never left me. Mondays were no longer ordinary. They had become days of dread. Each time I saw him handle the school bag, I felt a mixture of fear, confusion, and a growing determination to uncover the truth. I had to know what he was hiding, but I also had to protect our child at the same time. I began to observe him in a more structured way. I created a mental map of his movements, from the moment he woke up to the moment he left for work. Every pause, glance, or adjustment of his clothing became a clue. I noted the exact placement of the cash, the hidden compartment he used, and even the way he slightly shifted the bag so it would remain unnoticed by anyone else in the house. The level of care he put into this routine was astonishing. Our child continued to be blissfully unaware. They laughed, played, and hugged their father each morning, completely oblivious to the secret that the bag now carried. I felt both relief and despair. Relief because our child had no idea, and despair because the innocence of their early childhood was now entwined with something dangerous and illegal. Protecting them became my absolute priority. The more I watched, the more I realized that this was not an isolated act of secrecy. This was part of a pattern. There was a rhythm to it, a predictable schedule that suggested planning, preparation, and risk. My husband was not acting impulsively. He was methodical, deliberate, and extremely careful. That precision made me both frightened and determined. I knew I could not confront him without full knowledge, and yet I could not ignore what was happening. I began quietly reviewing our finances for clues. The $6,000 did not appear in any bank transactions. There were no unusual withdrawals, no deposits that could explain it, no receipts that could account for the cash. This meant that the money had to come from somewhere else entirely. The realization filled me with dread. I had married a man who was hiding an enormous secret, and I had no idea how far it extended. Each Monday, I grew more vigilant. I watched him handle the bag with the care of someone performing a ritual. He would pause, adjust the cash inside the compartment, and zip it carefully as though even the smallest mistake could ruin everything. I could almost hear the weight of the decision in the way he moved. There was tension in his shoulders, a flicker of fear in his eyes, and a constant attention to detail that suggested this was not just money. It was something much more serious. Despite my fear, I tried to maintain the appearance of normalcy. I smiled, chatted with him at breakfast, and helped our child with their routine. But inside I was building a mental file, cataloging every movement, every gesture, every pause. I began to anticipate the next Monday to prepare myself for what I might find. My instincts screamed that I could not delay any longer. I realized that the only way to understand the truth was to act cautiously and strategically. I could not let him know I suspected anything. If I did, he might stop, hide the cash elsewhere, or take risks that could endanger our child. I needed evidence, a plan, and a way to protect our family without tipping him off. It became clear that this situation required careful thinking, meticulous observation, and decisive action. I had to figure out the source of the cash, its purpose, and its potential danger. The weight of responsibility was enormous, and every day that passed without discovery increased the risk. I could not fail. By the second month, I had settled into a tense routine of careful observation. Mondays were no longer just a start to the week. They were a test of my awareness, patience, and ability to stay calm. I watched him from across the kitchen, pretending to read a book or check my phone while my eyes tracked every movement. The subtle tremor in his hands, the way he shifted the bag slightly before inserting the cash, the way he avoided eye contact. It all added up to something deliberate, intentional, and secret. I began keeping a small notebook hidden in my purse. Every Monday I wrote down what I saw. The time he arrived in the kitchen, the exact method he used to hide the cash, the way he glanced out the window before leaving for work. I even noted the way our child laughed, oblivious to the dangerous secret growing heavier in their backpack. Each entry confirmed my suspicion. This was not a one-time act or a careless mistake. This was a well-planned, regular routine. At first, I tried to reason with myself. Perhaps he had a legitimate explanation. Perhaps it was business-related. Or perhaps it was a gift from someone that needed to be kept hidden temporarily. But each imagined scenario fell apart under the weight of reality. No ordinary explanation could justify hiding $6,000 in a 4-year-old's school bag every single week. The more I observed, the more I realized that the stakes were higher than I had feared. This was no longer about money. This was about trust, safety, and the potential for serious danger. Our child could be unknowingly carrying something that could put them at risk, and I had to act before any harm came to them. The thought alone made my heart pound and my stomach churn. I began noticing other changes in my husband's behavior outside of Monday mornings. He started taking unusual routes to work, running errands at odd times, and making small trips that he never explained. Each action seemed minor on its own, but combined with the cash in the school bag, it painted a troubling picture. I realized that the man I had married, the devoted father and professional, might be living a hidden life I had never imagined. Despite the fear and confusion, I remained outwardly calm. I continued to smile at him, help our child get ready for school, and act as if everything were normal. Inside, however, I was building a mental strategy. I had to understand what was happening, determine the source of the cash, and protect our child without alerting him. Every observation, every note in my hidden notebook brought me closer to the truth. By now, I was no longer merely curious. I was determined. I could not allow the secrecy to continue. The routine was too precise, the amounts too large, and the risk to our child too high. I realized that uncovering the truth was a matter of urgency. Every Monday that passed without action increased the potential danger, and I could not accept that risk. The sense of dread was constant. I worried about what the cash could mean, who it involved, and how far it extended. Was this a small personal secret, or part of something much larger and more dangerous? The thought that our child could be unknowingly involved in something illegal or unsafe filled me with terror. I knew I had to act, but I also knew that acting without evidence could backfire. By the third month, I could no longer ignore the weight of what I was seeing. Each Monday, the routine became almost ritualistic. The careful placement of the cash, the way he zipped the compartment with exact precision, the subtle glances over his shoulder. It all told me that this was not a casual habit. This was deliberate, hidden in plain sight, and possibly dangerous. I began noticing the psychological impact it had on me. Every time our child picked up their backpack, I felt a surge of fear. The innocence in their little movements, the laughter and chatter, contrasted sharply with the secret they were unknowingly carrying. It made me feel helpless, as though a part of our family life had been hijacked by something I could not yet name. Protecting our child became the only thing that mattered. I tried to talk myself down from panic. Maybe it was a temporary solution, a one-time arrangement that my husband had been forced into. But each week, the consistency of the $6,000 reminded me that this was not temporary. It was systematic, planned, and carefully executed. The realization made my hands shake and my mind race. I began paying attention to small changes in his behavior during the rest of the week. He seemed unusually aware of what I was doing, cautious even when discussing mundane topics. There were moments when he would leave the room abruptly, take unexpected phone calls, or run sudden errands. Each small action now felt connected to the Mondays, the cash, and the secret that hovered over our family like a shadow. My husband had always been a man of meticulous habits. He managed every detail of our finances, every bill, and every household responsibility with precision. That same precision was now reflected in his secret routine. I realized that his careful, controlled personality made the deception even more dangerous. He was capable of hiding almost anything without leaving a trace. Despite my growing fear, I remained outwardly calm. I smiled, prepared breakfast, and helped our child get ready for school, all while mentally cataloging each movement, each glance, each subtle shift in behavior. I knew I had to maintain the appearance of normalcy to prevent him from suspecting that I was watching, observing, and quietly preparing. By now, I had begun to understand that confronting him directly was not an option. The potential danger to our child, the secrecy of the cash, and the possibility of a larger, more dangerous operation meant that any direct confrontation could escalate the risk. I needed to plan carefully, gather evidence, and ensure that I had a strategy to protect our family before taking any action. I started considering the steps I would take. First, I had to document everything in detail without leaving any trace. Each Monday, I observed the routine, noting times, amounts, and locations of the cash. Second, I knew I would need professional help, someone who could investigate without alerting my husband. Third, I realized that this would require careful legal planning to secure our assets and protect our child once the truth was revealed. The fear was overwhelming, but it was accompanied by a sense of clarity. I understood that my next actions would determine the safety and future of our child, and potentially the outcome of our entire family life. The routine had exposed a hidden layer of my husband that I had never seen, and it forced me to make decisions I never imagined I would have to make. The first Monday after I had resolved to pay closer attention, I woke earlier than usual. The house was quiet, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of birds outside the window. I waited in the kitchen, pretending to prepare breakfast while my mind raced. I watched him approach the school bag with the precision I had come to recognize. He moved slowly, almost ceremoniously, adjusting the bag, checking the compartments, and finally inserting a thick bundle of cash. I held my breath. My heart pounded so loudly I thought he might hear it. The sight of our child innocently reaching for their backpack while their father hid thousands of dollars inside made me feel as though the floor had disappeared beneath me. This was no ordinary routine. This was a calculated, risky, and potentially dangerous act that involved our child. I decided immediately that I could not confront him. I needed proof, evidence that could protect both our child and myself. I began formulating a plan in my mind, a step-by-step approach to uncover the truth without alerting him. The first step was observation. I would record every detail, every movement, every moment. I began following him subtly throughout the week. I noted the times he left for work, the routes he took, and the unusual errands he ran. At first, these observations seemed minor. A drive down a side street, a quick stop at a convenience store, a phone call taken in a quiet, secluded area. But gradually a pattern emerged. Each movement, each stop, seemed connected to the cash in the school bag. I realized that if I wanted to understand the full scope of his actions, I would need help. I could not do this alone. I began researching private investigators, carefully checking credentials, reading reviews, and making discreet inquiries. I needed someone professional, someone who could follow him without raising suspicion. I also began consulting a family lawyer, quietly, without revealing the full extent of my fears, just to understand how to protect our assets and our child legally. The following Monday, I implemented the first part of my plan. I discreetly opened the school bag after my husband left, carefully counting the cash, inspecting how it was wrapped, and noting the compartment he used. Each detail was meticulously documented in a hidden notebook. I observed the weight of the bundles, the slight differences in texture and denomination, and the way they fit perfectly into the compartment. It was astonishing to see such careful planning. As the weeks passed, the surveillance intensified. I tracked his movements, noting who he met and where he went. He visited locations that seemed innocent at first, a gas station, a park, a small cafe, but over time, these stops revealed a pattern of meetings with people who were clearly not part of our ordinary lives. Shadowy figures, quiet exchanges, and discreet handoffs suggested something larger and more dangerous than I could have imagined. At this point, I realized that the cash was not simply a personal secret or a minor financial deception. It was connected to a world I had never encountered before. I began piecing together the reality, the consistent amounts, the careful concealment, and the regular meetings suggested illegal activity. The realization was terrifying. My husband, the man I had trusted, was living a secret life, and our child was unknowingly part of it. I intensified my preparations. I secretly retained a private investigator, providing only the minimal information necessary to ensure discretion. I also consulted my lawyer in private, preparing for the moment when I could act decisively. I realized that I would need to move quickly once the full truth was revealed, both to protect our child and to secure our legal position. The private investigator began sending detailed reports. Week by week, they documented my husband's movements, the people he met, and the suspicious activities he engaged in. There were deliveries at odd hours, brief handoffs of small packages, and trips to locations that were never explained. The picture was becoming clearer, and each report increased my fear and my determination. Then came the unthinkable revelation. The private investigator discovered that the cash was connected to a large-scale illegal operation. My husband's secret life involved transactions that were dangerous, criminal, and potentially violent. The realization hit me like a hammer. The money in our child's bag was not just cash. It was part of an operation that could put our family in extreme danger. I felt a wave of disbelief, anger, and fear. How could the man I had married involve our child in something so dangerous? How could he hide this from me while maintaining the appearance of a normal life? The answers were clear in the reports. He was deliberate, cautious, and had managed to live a double life without detection until now. At that moment, I knew that immediate action was necessary. I could not allow him to continue putting our child at risk. I began taking steps to secure our assets, protect our child, and prepare for legal action. I transferred joint savings to a separate account, arranged emergency custody measures, and prepared detailed evidence to present to the authorities if necessary. The balance of fear and control was intense. I had to act decisively yet carefully, knowing that any misstep could endanger our child. The private investigators' reports became the backbone of my plan. I read each page multiple times, noting every detail, every time, every person involved until the picture was undeniable. The first week after hiring the private investigator felt like living in two separate realities. On the surface, nothing had changed. Our mornings were filled with the familiar sound of cereal crunching, the small voice of our child asking questions, and my husband's calm, collected routine. He approached the school bag with the same exact precision as he always did, placing the thick bundle of cash into the hidden compartment, zipping it closed carefully, and walking away as if nothing unusual had happened. But beneath that calm surface, a quiet storm was building. I now knew I wasn't just imagining things. The investigators' first updates were simple, basic observations, movements, and locations. But even those early notes unsettled me. He wasn't going to work directly on Mondays. He was taking a detour each time, stopping in the same area not far from our child's preschool, staying for a few minutes, then continuing on. There was no record of these stops on his calendar, no mention of them in our conversations. The second week, the details grew sharper. The investigator followed him to a small parking lot behind a row of plain, older buildings near the edge of town. It wasn't a place he'd have any reason to be. The lot was almost always empty except for a few cars that came and went at specific times. The investigator observed a brief exchange. My husband handed off the bag, then received a different one. The meeting lasted less than a minute. No words appeared to be spoken. It was quick, quiet, and calculated. When I received that first report, my stomach turned cold. I sat at the kitchen table late at night, reading the typed lines over and over again. The neat language describing each movement made it feel clinical, but I could feel the danger beneath the surface of every word. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was real. I didn't confront him. I couldn't. Instead, I expanded my own surveillance at home. I began using my phone's voice notes to record the times I saw him handling the bag. I photographed the bundles of cash after he left, careful to leave no trace of my interference. I even noted how much he looked around the kitchen before handling the bag. His caution told me that he was fully aware of the risk of being discovered. He just didn't think I would ever be the one watching him. As the investigators' reports accumulated, a pattern emerged. Each Monday was exactly the same. The cash, the hidden compartment, the quiet drive, the short meeting, the handoff. It was almost mechanical. I realized that this routine wasn't new. It had been going on for a long time, possibly months before I even noticed. My lawyer meetings became more serious. At first, I had asked general questions about custody, about asset protection, about legal safety measures. But now, armed with growing evidence, my questions became sharper. I wanted to know how to secure our finances without alerting him, how to protect our child legally, and how to file for an emergency restraining order if needed. Each night after our child was asleep, I sat alone with my notebook and the investigator's reports, piecing everything together. I drew timelines, mapped his movements, and listed every person he met. One name kept appearing. a man identified only as S. He was present at almost every handoff. According to the investigator, S had a known history with law enforcement, though not for anything that had gone to trial. The investigator's language was careful, but between the lines, the message was clear. This was not a casual friend. The more I learned, the more terrifying it became. This wasn't a small side hustle or a secret savings plan. The investigator confirmed that these were cash drops, payments or transfers tied to a much larger operation. My husband had become part of an illegal network, using our child's school bag as the perfect, innocent-looking delivery method. I began to move money quietly. I transferred portions of our joint savings into an account in my name only. I made copies of important financial records and stored them in a locked box outside the house. I met with the lawyer again, this time bringing the investigator's reports. She didn't need to say much. The weight of what was in those pages spoke for itself. As the weeks turned into months, the private investigator expanded his surveillance. My husband was meeting different people in quiet, out-of-the-way locations: an abandoned strip mall, the edge of a park, a storage facility on the outskirts of town. The exchanges were always quick. No one stayed long. No words were recorded, just quiet, controlled movement. Bags in, bags out. The investigator eventually traced the operation back further. The money wasn't just going to one person. It was being funneled through a chain of individuals. And the group at the center of it was connected to something far more dangerous: a trafficking network that moved both drugs and cash through seemingly ordinary people. My husband wasn't just involved. He was a trusted link in the chain. The shock of that revelation was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I had shared a home, a bed, a life with this man. I had trusted him with our child. And the entire time, he had been using our child as a cover for criminal activity. The thought made my hands shake so badly I had to set the report down. I realized then that there was no going back. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be explained away. This wasn't a conversation we could have and move on from. This was a betrayal so deep and so dangerous that it required action. I needed to protect our child, myself, and what remained of our future. I started preparing the legal side in full. I filed quiet paperwork with my lawyer. I began setting up an emergency custody plan that could be triggered the moment everything came to light. I made sure that the financial transfers were undetectable to him. I began storing physical evidence: the photographs of the cash, the investigators' reports, copies of messages, time logs, and even a written record of every interaction I had with him that seemed suspicious. It felt strange to live in a house with someone while secretly planning to dismantle the life we shared. Every smile I forced at breakfast, every casual conversation about groceries or errands, every goodnight kiss was an act of survival. He didn't know that the ground beneath him was slowly being pulled away, inch by inch. The investigator advised me to stay quiet a little longer. The more evidence gathered, the stronger my legal case would be. The longer I waited, the clearer the entire operation would become. It was the hardest waiting of my life. I slept little. I ate less. My entire focus was on the safety of our child and the careful construction of a wall that he could not climb back over once the truth was revealed. The first week after hiring the private investigator felt like living in two separate realities. On the surface, nothing had changed. Our mornings were filled with the familiar sound of cereal crunching, the small voice of our child asking questions, and my husband's calm, collected routine. He approached the school bag with the same exact precision as he always did, placing the thick bundle of cash into the hidden compartment, zipping it closed carefully, and walking away as if nothing unusual had happened. But beneath that calm surface, a quiet storm was building. I now knew I wasn't just imagining things. The investigators' first updates were simple: basic observations, movements, and locations. But even those early notes unsettled me. He wasn't going to work directly on Mondays. He was taking a detour each time, stopping in the same area not far from our child's preschool, staying for a few minutes, then continuing on. There was no record of these stops on his calendar, no mention of them in our conversations. The second week, the details grew sharper. The investigator followed him to a small parking lot behind a row of plain, older buildings near the edge of town. It wasn't a place he'd have any reason to be. The lot was almost always empty except for a few cars that came and went at specific times. The investigator observed a brief exchange. My husband handed off the bag, then received a different one. The meeting lasted less than a minute. No words appeared to be spoken. It was quick, quiet, and calculated. When I received that first report, my stomach turned cold. I sat at the kitchen table late at night, reading the typed lines over and over again. The neat language describing each movement made it feel clinical. But I could feel the danger beneath the surface of every word. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was real. I didn't confront him. I couldn't. Instead, I expanded my own surveillance at home. I began using my phone's voice notes to record the times I saw him handling the bag. I photographed the bundles of cash after he left, careful to leave no trace of my interference. I even noted how much he looked around the kitchen before handling the bag. His caution told me that he was fully aware of the risk of being discovered. He just didn't think I would ever be the one watching him. As the investigators' reports accumulated, a pattern emerged. Each Monday was exactly the same. The cash, the hidden compartment, the quiet drive, the short meeting, the handoff. It was almost mechanical. I realized that this routine wasn't new. It had been going on for a long time, possibly months before I even noticed. My lawyer meetings became more serious. At first, I had asked general questions about custody, about asset protection, about legal safety measures. But now, armed with growing evidence, my questions became sharper. I wanted to know how to secure our finances without alerting him, how to protect our child legally, and how to file for an emergency restraining order if needed. Each night, after our child was asleep, I sat alone with my notebook and the investigators' reports, piecing everything together. I drew timelines, mapped his movements, and listed every person he met. One name kept appearing, a man identified only as S. He was present at almost every handoff. According to the investigator, S had a known history with law enforcement, though not for anything that had gone to trial. The investigator's language was careful, but between the lines the message was clear. This was not a casual friend. The more I learned, the more terrifying it became. This wasn't a small side hustle or a secret savings plan. The investigator confirmed that these were cash drops, payments or transfers tied to a much larger operation. My husband had become part of an illegal network, using our child's school bag as the perfect, innocent-looking delivery method. I began to move money quietly. I transferred portions of our joint savings into an account in my name only. I made copies of important financial records and stored them in a locked box outside the house. I met with the lawyer again, this time bringing the investigator's reports. She didn't need to say much. The weight of what was in those pages spoke for itself. As the weeks turned into months, the private investigator expanded his surveillance. My husband was meeting different people in quiet, out-of-the-way locations. An abandoned strip mall, the edge of a park, a storage facility on the outskirts of town. The exchanges were always quick. No one stayed long. No words were recorded, just quiet, controlled movement. Bags in, bags out. The investigator eventually traced the operation back further. The money wasn't just going to one person. It was being funneled through a chain of individuals. And the group at the center of it was connected to something far more dangerous, a trafficking network that moved both drugs and cash through seemingly ordinary people. My husband wasn't just involved, he was a trusted link in the chain. The shock of that revelation was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I had shared a home, a bed, a life with this man. I had trusted him with our child, and the entire time he had been using our child as a cover for criminal activity. The thought made my hands shake so badly I had to set the report down. I realized then that there was no going back. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be explained away. This wasn't a conversation we could have and move on from. This was a betrayal so deep and so dangerous that it required action. I needed to protect our child, myself, and what remained of our future. I started preparing the legal side in full. I filed quiet paperwork with my lawyer. I began setting up an emergency custody plan that could be triggered the moment everything came to light. I made sure that the financial transfers were undetectable to him. I began storing physical evidence. The photographs of the cash, the investigators' reports, copies of messages, time logs, and even a written record of every interaction I had with him that seemed suspicious. It felt strange to live in a house with someone while secretly planning to dismantle the life we shared. Every smile I forced at breakfast, every casual conversation about groceries or errands, every goodnight kiss was an act of survival. He didn't know that the ground beneath him was slowly being pulled away inch by inch. The investigator advised me to stay quiet a little longer. The more evidence gathered, the stronger my legal case would be. The longer I waited, the clearer the entire operation would become. It was the hardest waiting of my life. I slept little. I ate less. My entire focus was on the safety of our child and the careful construction of a wall that he could not climb back over once the truth was revealed. The next stage of the investigation felt like living behind a glass wall. From the outside, our family looked unchanged. Our child went to preschool every morning with a bright smile. My husband carried himself with the same calm efficiency, and our house in Maine still felt warm and familiar to anyone who didn't know the truth. But from the inside, everything was shifting. Every glance, every small gesture, every Monday morning movement held weight. The private investigator increased the scope of their work. Instead of just following my husband on Mondays, they began discreet surveillance throughout the week. Small things stood out. He started meeting different people on Wednesdays, too, though the transactions were smaller. On Fridays, he received unmarked envelopes. These details painted a picture I couldn't ignore. He wasn't a bystander. He was deeply involved. The investigator documented everything. Photographs of cars with license plates partially covered, locations on the outskirts of town, repeated patterns, meet, hand off, leave. My husband's face remained calm in every image. He looked the same way he did at home, as though nothing was wrong, as though this life of secret transactions was as natural to him as making coffee in the kitchen. I began to realize just how skilled he was at deception. He had built a life where he could stand in our home each night, ask about our child's day, talk about weekend plans, and still carry a secret criminal operation in the background without a hint of guilt. He moved through our shared life like a shadow. That understanding made the danger feel more real. If he could lie this easily, then he could be capable of almost anything. I expanded my documentation at home. Every Monday morning after he left, I opened the bag, counted the $6,000, photographed the exact placement, and resealed everything without a trace. The cash was always the same, neat stacks, crisp bills wrapped with a tight band. Over time, I noticed subtle differences in how the bundles were prepared, like small marks or folds on the band. The investigator later explained these were likely indicators used to track each delivery. That detail alone made my chest tighten with fear. The investigators' second major report changed everything. They had traced the operation back to a warehouse outside town. It was hidden behind a business front that pretended to be a shipping company. At first glance, it looked like any small distribution center, but after days of surveillance, it became clear it wasn't legitimate. Cars came and went at odd hours. No one carried shipping materials. Instead, they carried black duffel bags and small boxes. My husband visited this warehouse once every 2 weeks. The moment I read those words, I knew the scale of this was far bigger than I had imagined. It wasn't just small drops or local exchanges. He was connected to a structured, organized network that used cash to move illegal products through ordinary places. Our child's school bag had become a tiny but deliberate piece of a much larger machine. This was the turning point for me. I understood that silence would not just be dangerous, it could be fatal. If I confronted him too early, he might panic. He might run, or worse, he might try to use our child as leverage. That thought alone chilled me to the bone. I needed a plan that would not just expose the truth, but remove his power entirely. I scheduled another meeting with my lawyer, this time behind closed doors in her office. I laid out the investigator's reports on her desk, page by page. The air in the room grew still as she read through the details. She explained the legal path with clarity. If I wanted to act swiftly, I would need everything lined up. Asset control, custody filings, protective orders, and a coordinated report to the authorities. Once I made the move, there would be no turning back. That night, while my husband sat in the living room watching television as if nothing in the world were wrong, I sat silently at the kitchen table drafting my own timeline. Step 1, secure finances. Step 2, secure custody. Step 3, report the evidence to the right people. Step 4, file for divorce the moment he was exposed. I didn't allow myself to cry. I had done that silently weeks earlier, when I first realized what was happening. Now I was only cold, clear, and deliberate. The private investigator continued to follow him, gathering more pieces of the puzzle. He uncovered names, aliases mostly, but they matched law enforcement watch lists. These weren't petty criminals. They were part of a larger, dangerous network. The cash wasn't random. It was carefully structured to avoid detection, moved in small amounts that together formed a massive operation. My husband was not on the edge of it. He was in the center. Each Monday became a strange theater of lies. I would make breakfast, help our child into their coat, watch him slide the bundle into the bag, and smile as though nothing was wrong. Inside, I was already picturing the moment everything would collapse for him. That image kept me steady. I told myself that the longer I stayed silent, the stronger my position would be when the truth finally broke. The investigator eventually found something that broke whatever last piece of hope I had. A recording of one of his meetings captured a brief conversation, short, coded, but unmistakable. He was arranging a shipment, and the drop through the school route was part of it. He wasn't being forced. He was in control. The cash was his responsibility. The risk was deliberate. I remember the exact moment I read that report. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, the house silent except for the faint sound of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My hands went numb as I stared at the page. The man I had loved for years was not a victim of circumstance. He was a willing participant in something dangerous. And worst of all, he had put our child at the center of it. That was when I decided the timeline would no longer be theoretical. I contacted the lawyer the next morning and set the legal process in motion. My accounts were already separated. My child's custody paperwork was prepared. The investigators' files were cataloged, with multiple backups stored outside the house. I even made sure that a trusted friend knew where to find the evidence if anything happened to me. Every move I made was quiet. He didn't notice. He believed his secret life remained hidden, wrapped tightly behind his calm smile and his steady voice. But the ground beneath him was already gone. By now, every Monday had become a ritual of silent dread. I watched my husband place the bundle of $6,000 into the school bag with the same calm efficiency he had shown for months. He zipped the compartment with care, adjusted the straps, and carried our child to the car as if nothing unusual were happening. And yet, behind my calm exterior, I was preparing for something far more decisive. The private investigators' reports were piling up. Every meeting, every handoff, every odd errand was documented in precise detail. The photographs showed him standing in empty parking lots, exchanging bags with shadowy figures, checking over his shoulder before slipping away. The notes included license plates, clothing descriptions, and timestamps accurate to the second. Each week, the picture became clearer. It was no longer enough to simply observe. I needed to secure control over every aspect of our family's life before making the next move. I began moving our finances carefully, quietly, transferring funds to accounts he could not access. Every transfer was deliberate, ensuring that no trace could alert him. I also duplicated critical documents, birth certificates, property deeds, and banking statements, and stored them securely with my lawyer and a trusted friend. At night, I reviewed the investigators' findings with meticulous attention. The codes, the patterns, the timing of each drop, all of it told a story of careful planning and deliberate criminal activity. Each photograph, each written note, each recorded movement became another piece of the puzzle. I was building a case that could withstand any attempt at denial. I also began coordinating with the lawyer to prepare emergency legal measures. Custody filings were drafted with supporting evidence. Emergency protective orders were prepared in case I needed immediate action to remove our child from danger. Every step was planned to be executed swiftly and decisively, leaving no room for argument or delay. One week, the investigator uncovered something even more alarming. My husband had met with individuals known for violent enforcement within the operation. While most exchanges had been quick and controlled, this particular meeting lasted longer. The report described careful, hushed words, deliberate movements, and a sense of authority my husband had assumed with ease. The realization that he was interacting with dangerous people who could threaten anyone in the wrong place at the wrong time made the risk feel immediate. That night, I sat alone in the living room, our child asleep in the other room, and made a decision. I could no longer hesitate. My priorities were clear. Protect my child, secure our assets, and gather irrefutable evidence for the legal process. Everything else, the marriage, the trust I once had, was secondary. The safety of our family depended on precision, patience, and action. The following Monday, I took additional steps. I carefully photographed the bundle of cash in the school bag, noting serial numbers for documentation purposes. I stored copies of these images in secure digital locations, ensuring redundancy in case anything went wrong. I also reviewed the investigators' reports for inconsistencies or gaps, making sure that every detail of my husband's routine and contacts was accounted for. I realized that timing was critical. Acting too soon might alert him. Waiting too long could increase risk. I set a schedule with my lawyer for the legal filings, ensuring that custody, divorce, and protective orders could all be executed simultaneously. Every step was designed to give me total control of the situation the moment the truth was revealed. Over the next few weeks, the tension became almost unbearable. I interacted with him normally, helped our child with breakfast, and carried on daily life as if nothing were wrong. But inside, I was preparing for the final move, Every time he handled the bag, every subtle glance over his shoulder, every carefully executed Monday morning routine reinforced my resolve. The man I had trusted had deliberately involved our child in a criminal operation. I could not allow it to continue. The investigators' final reports confirmed the worst. The network was extensive, highly organized, and connected to international operations. The cash moved through a chain of intermediaries, each step calculated to avoid detection. My husband was not a passive participant. He was a central link. The realization made me shiver, but it also clarified my purpose. I made the final preparations. Copies of all reports were compiled, timelines documented, and photographs stored in multiple secure locations. The lawyer confirmed that once filings were submitted, the legal system would protect our child and ensure that my husband could not interfere. Custody arrangements would be immediate. Protective orders would prevent him from contact. Assets were secured. Everything was in place for a decisive, immediate action. Every morning I reminded myself why I was doing this. It was not revenge. It was not anger. It was protection. The $6,000 hidden in a 4-year-old's backpack every Monday had revealed a hidden life of deceit, danger, and criminal activity. The life I had once trusted no longer existed. My child's safety depended on swift, unflinching action. The week I decided to act was the most tense of all. Every morning I woke with a tight knot in my stomach, knowing that the calm, ordinary life we had shared was about to end forever. Our child's laughter and chatter at breakfast felt sharper, louder, almost surreal against the knowledge I had now. Each small gesture, each innocent question, reminded me why I had to move quickly and decisively. The private investigator delivered the final batch of surveillance reports. Every meeting, every handoff, every route my husband had taken over the past months was documented with precision. I read them repeatedly, mapping the timeline in my mind. Each photograph, each note, each recorded moment was another layer of evidence. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about proving the full scope of his criminal activity, ensuring that there could be no argument, no attempt at denial. I spent hours preparing the legal documents with my lawyer. Custody filings, protective orders, divorce papers, and asset control measures were meticulously drafted. Every page referenced specific evidence, dates, and times. Each piece was backed up by photographs, investigator notes, and detailed logs of his actions. We planned for the filings to be simultaneous. The moment they were submitted, he would be confronted not with a claim, but with undeniable proof. I also made sure our finances were fully secure. Joint accounts were transferred to my name alone. Emergency funds were moved to a hidden account, and all critical documents were stored with my lawyer and a trusted friend. I created multiple backups of the investigators' reports on secure digital platforms. Every precaution was taken to ensure that no matter how he reacted, I would remain in control. Monday morning arrived. I prepared breakfast for our child, laughing softly at their innocent excitement. I watched my husband move toward the school bag with the same careful precision he had shown for months. He slid the bundle of $6,000 into the hidden compartment, zipped it closed, and smiled down at our child. That smile, once a symbol of love and trust, now carried the weight of betrayal. I held my breath and waited. After he left, I opened the bag carefully, confirmed the cash was in place, and photographed the bundle. The serial numbers were recorded. Notes were updated. Everything matched the investigators' previous observations. The reality was undeniable. This was not a mistake, and it was not a secret that could be explained away. The evidence was complete. I called my lawyer, who confirmed that all filings could now be submitted immediately. Custody, divorce, and protective orders would all be processed in a coordinated manner. The plan was precise. Once the filings were submitted, my husband would be confronted not with a question, but with the full weight of truth. The $6,000, the secret meetings, the dangerous criminal network, all of it would be laid bare. The following day, the documents were filed. My lawyer submitted everything simultaneously: custody papers, protective orders, divorce filings, and a detailed evidence package documenting every aspect of his secret life. The process was smooth, precise, and deliberate. Within hours, the legal system had recognized my filings, and the protective measures were in place. I stayed calm at home while my husband remained oblivious. He continued his usual routine, unaware that the foundation of his secret life had been quietly dismantled. Our child remained blissfully unaware, playing on the floor with toys, completely protected. Every detail of the filings ensured that he could not interfere, could not access accounts, and could not challenge custody without exposing his own criminal activity. That evening, the first notice reached him. The protective order and custody filings were served. The divorce papers followed almost immediately. The look on his face when he realized that the legal system now fully recognized my evidence was unforgettable. Shock, disbelief, and the sudden understanding of defeat crossed his features. He had no time to argue, no opportunity to maneuver, no way to protect the criminal operation he had built. The $6,000 hidden in a 4-year-old's school bag, once a secret known only to him, was now part of a documented chain of evidence. The truth of his double life had been revealed not with confrontation, but with preparation, precision, and care. He could not deny what was documented, photographed, and verified by professionals. In the days that followed, the legal system moved swiftly. Custody of our child was secured immediately. Protective orders ensured he could not approach or interfere. Assets were frozen or transferred to my control. The authorities were informed of the criminal investigation, with the private investigator's documentation forming the basis for future proceedings. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. The danger had been neutralized. Our child was safe. The secret life that had threatened everything had been exposed and contained. I began the slow, careful process of rebuilding a life based on truth rather than deception. The weeks after I had retained the private investigator became a blur of careful observation and quiet preparation. Each Monday, the ritual played out like a well-rehearsed performance. I watched from the kitchen, pretending to read the morning news, while my husband carefully placed the bundle of $6,000 into our child's backpack. He checked the hidden compartment with precision, zipped it closed, and carried our child to the car with a casual smile, completely unaware that I was recording every detail mentally and in my hidden notebook. I began documenting even subtler movements, the slight tremor in his hand as he inserted the cash, the way he tilted the backpack to ensure nothing was visible, the brief pause he took before leaving the room, as if double-checking that no one had seen him. Each detail, once unnoticed, now became a critical part of the larger picture I was constructing. Meanwhile, the private investigator expanded surveillance to cover the entire week. He followed my husband to meetings that initially seemed mundane, a quick stop at a hardware store, a drive through a quiet neighborhood. But gradually the pattern revealed a network of exchanges. Cars met in empty parking lots. Bags were handed off silently. Shadowy figures appeared briefly, exchanged items, and disappeared. It was almost like watching a choreography, precise and controlled, but utterly illegal. The investigators' reports were painstakingly detailed. Every photograph included timestamps, vehicle descriptions, and clothing notes. Every note recorded the exact movement, location, and duration of each meeting. The clarity of the reports made the reality undeniable. My husband was not simply hiding money. He was actively participating in a dangerous criminal network, and our child's backpack was a critical part of it. I intensified my personal monitoring at home. Each Monday, I opened the backpack carefully after my husband left, photographed the cash, and documented serial numbers. I noted differences in the bills, small folds, creases, and markings that suggested a tracking system within the criminal operation. Each week, the bundles were placed slightly differently, but always with the same care and intention. The precision was unnerving. I also began coordinating closely with my lawyer. Each investigator report was cataloged and backed up. I made digital copies, stored off-site, and ensured that every photograph, note, and observation had multiple redundancies. Custody preparation, asset protection, and emergency legal measures were carefully aligned to coincide with the moment I would take action. Every piece of evidence was organized to leave no room for dispute. The investigator uncovered a critical turning point. My husband's handoffs were not random. They followed a strict schedule and involved several intermediaries. One of them, identified only as S, appeared at almost every exchange. S had a documented history of violent enforcement within the network. The reports described tense, deliberate movements, careful avoidance of observation, and clear awareness that any mistake could be dangerous. My husband was not a peripheral participant. He was central, trusted, and responsible. The more I read the reports, the more the danger became real. This was not a theoretical threat. My husband had knowingly involved our child in these exchanges. Our home, our daily routine, even our child's innocent laughter. Everything had been part of a cover for something criminal and dangerous. The realization filled me with fear, but also with determination. I could not confront him directly. The risk to our child was too high. I began preparing the final steps of my plan. Financial accounts were quietly separated. Joint savings were transferred to my control. Critical documents, birth certificates, deeds, financial statements were duplicated and secured off-site. Emergency contact measures were prepared with trusted friends. Every precaution was designed to give me full control the moment legal action was taken. Each Monday, as the ritual continued, I rehearsed the steps in my mind. Open the bag, count the cash, photograph the bundles, update the timeline, review the investigator's report, confirm that all evidence was intact, coordinate with the lawyer, prepare for filings. The repetition, once terrifying, became a methodical rhythm, giving me clarity and purpose. Then came the final shocking discovery. The investigator traced the network back to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. Vehicles arrived at odd hours, carrying black duffel bags. My husband was observed meeting intermediaries, exchanging bags, and leaving without drawing attention. The warehouse, disguised as a shipping facility, was central to the operation. The $6,000 in our child's backpack was a small but critical part of a much larger, highly organized criminal system. At that moment, I understood the scale of what I was dealing with. This was no longer about curiosity or suspicion. This was about protecting my child, securing my family, and dismantling a dangerous network that my husband had embedded us in without our knowledge. The weight of the truth pressed down on me, but it also clarified my next steps. I coordinated with my lawyer to prepare simultaneous filings: custody, protective orders, divorce, and evidence documentation. Everything had to be executed at the same moment to prevent any interference. I reviewed every investigator report, every photograph, every note. The details were overwhelming but essential. Precision was critical. The morning I filed the documents was surreal. Our home looked exactly the same as it always had. Our child laughed as I poured cereal into a bowl. My husband moved with his usual calm, placing the backpack into our child's hands, completely unaware that the foundation of his secret life had already been dismantled. The $6,000, the hidden compartments, the clandestine meetings, all of it had been documented, secured, and submitted to the legal system. I felt a quiet weight in my chest. There was no anger, no screaming, no confrontation. All the preparation, all the observation, all the careful planning had led to this moment. The law now recognized what I had known for months. Our child's safety had been compromised. The financial deception was undeniable, and his secret criminal activities were documented beyond dispute. The first papers were served. Custody was granted immediately to me, with protective orders ensuring he could not approach or interfere. Divorce filings followed, and the documentation of his criminal activity made any attempt to argue or delay meaningless. He read the papers, and I could see the shock in his eyes. For the first time, he realized that the carefully constructed web of deception he had lived in was gone. There was no way to spin it, no way to recover the life he had secretly built. The look on his face was unforgettable. The calm, confident man who had hidden thousands of dollars in our child's backpack every Monday was suddenly defeated. The weight of his own choices crushed him, leaving only disbelief and the cold realization that his secret was now exposed to the law and the authorities. Meanwhile, I focused entirely on our child. I made sure that their routine remained undisturbed, that the transition was calm, and that they continued to feel safe. Every hug, every small question, every laugh reminded me why I had acted. Protecting them had been the only priority, and now the immediate danger was gone. The authorities were informed about the larger criminal network. The investigators' reports were submitted as evidence detailing the scope of my husband's involvement and the methods he used to move cash through our child's school bag. Law enforcement took the matter seriously, understanding the danger and the deliberate planning involved. Assets were secured. The accounts I had quietly moved into my control remained protected. Important documents previously duplicated and stored safely were now part of the legal record. I had ensured that nothing he could access would jeopardize our child or our future. Every precaution I had taken was now validated by the law. In the weeks that followed, the divorce was finalized. Custody remained fully with me. Protective orders ensured he could not have direct contact with our child. The legal system moved swiftly, supported by the detailed evidence and careful preparation I had compiled over months of observation and investigation. For the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. The danger that had shadowed every Monday, every morning routine, every small gesture was gone. The secret life that had threatened our family was exposed, dismantled, and contained. I began the slow process of rebuilding life on a foundation of truth, safety, and trust. I reflected on how a single act, simply noticing the unusual behavior with our child's school bag, had changed everything. It had revealed the hidden deception, the dangerous criminal activity, and the betrayal of trust I had once taken for granted. That act of attention, observation, and determination had saved our child's life and secured a future free from danger. In the weeks after the divorce was finalized, life became a careful balance of normalcy and vigilance. I established routines that protected our child while slowly reclaiming our home from the shadow of secrecy that had hung over it for so long. Each morning I walked our child to school, making sure their backpack was empty of anything other than books, lunch, and the innocent trinkets of childhood. The weight of the $6,000 was gone. But the memory of what could have happened lingered, reminding me how close danger had been. I focused on rebuilding trust in our own lives. Meals became slower, calmer affairs. Bedtime stories took on a new importance, a time to reconnect, to nurture, to remind our child that the world was safe. The little routines, brushing teeth, picking out clothes, The small chatter about the day became anchors of stability. I realized that the ordinary acts of parenting, which I had once taken for granted, were now vital shields against the chaos that had once surrounded us. The financial aftermath was complicated but manageable. Because of the careful steps I had taken, all assets were secured. My husband could not access accounts, real estate, or financial records. I worked with my lawyer to ensure that every joint investment was protected, that the transfer of funds had been legally validated, and that no lingering claims could jeopardize our stability. Each financial step reinforced the protection I had worked for over months of careful observation and planning. Authorities began following up on the criminal investigation. The documentation provided by the private investigator formed the foundation of their case. They contacted me for additional details, clarifications, and confirmation of timelines. I was careful, methodical, and precise. The evidence had to be clear, unquestionable, and thorough. My priority was never revenge. It was safety, accountability, and justice. I also faced emotional consequences. Friends and family struggled to understand the depth of the betrayal and the speed of the legal action. Some were supportive, others skeptical. The decision to act in secret, to dismantle the life we had built, left ripples through our social and family networks. Yet I remained resolute. Protecting our child and securing the future mattered far more than appeasing opinions or easing the shock of relatives who had no idea what had been occurring behind closed doors. Slowly, life regained a rhythm. I arranged playdates, enrolled our child in new activities, and began to reclaim small joys that had been overshadowed by fear and tension. Even the simplest things, a visit to the park, a quiet afternoon reading together, felt like victories. Each moment of normalcy reinforced that the danger had passed, that careful preparation had ensured our survival, and that the betrayal had not defined our future. I reflected often on how a single observation, curiosity about a school bag, had uncovered layers of deception I could never have imagined. The careful planning, the private investigation, the legal strategy, all of it had been necessary to dismantle a hidden criminal life while protecting the one innocent person involved, my child. Every Monday morning, routine that had once seemed ordinary had masked something terrifying, and noticing it had changed the trajectory of our lives. Even now, months later, the memory of the $6,000 remains vivid. It is a reminder of how trust can be broken, how secrecy can endanger those we love, and how courage, careful planning, and decisive action can restore safety. I know I made difficult choices, but I also know that every action was guided by the need to protect, not punish, to secure a future, not dwell in the past. I am rebuilding, slowly, carefully, and intentionally. Our child thrives, our home is safe, and the danger has been removed. Life is not perfect, and the scars of betrayal remain, but there is clarity, there is peace, and there is a sense of control that I could not have imagined months earlier. Every morning when our child grabs their backpack, it holds only books, toys, and lunches, never hidden cash, never secret danger. Even after the divorce was finalized, the shadow of what had happened lingered in small ways. I found myself constantly checking our child's belongings, making sure that nothing unusual was ever hidden again. Even ordinary routines, packing lunches, organizing school supplies, putting jackets in the closet, became acts of vigilance. Every Monday carried a quiet memory of the bundles of cash and the betrayal that had been hidden in plain sight for months. I realized that part of healing was creating a new normal. I reorganized our home to feel safer, brighter, and more controlled. Each room became a symbol of security rather than secrecy. The living room, once a stage for careful observation, became a place for games, reading, and quiet conversation. The kitchen, once a place where I watched silently as danger passed through, became a space of laughter and ordinary family life. Financial control allowed me to feel a renewed sense of independence. With the joint accounts separated and assets secured, I could plan for the future without fear of interference. I began budgeting carefully, investing thoughtfully, and making sure that every decision was focused on stability and safety. The knowledge that my actions had protected our child gave me confidence, even in moments of fatigue or uncertainty. Emotionally, I worked to separate fear from anger. While I would never forget the betrayal, I understood that dwelling on it would not restore security. The focus had to remain on our child and on rebuilding a life where trust could exist again. I spent long evenings reflecting, journaling, and making plans for what safety and normalcy would look like over the next months and years. Support networks became crucial. I leaned on trusted friends and family members who understood the stakes and who provided quiet guidance and reassurance. I explained only what was necessary, protecting the child from details that were too dangerous or frightening for their age. Every conversation was measured, careful, and purposeful. Our child adapted quickly. The routines I established, school, playdates, bedtime rituals, became consistent anchors. I noticed small signs of relief, laughter without hesitation, curiosity without fear, and an overall sense of safety that had been missing for months. Every smile was a reminder of why I had acted, why I had observed, and why I had moved decisively to protect them. The legal process continued quietly in the background. Law enforcement followed up on the private investigators' documentation, opening cases, and conducting interviews. I provided additional evidence when necessary, always keeping our child's safety as the priority. The system worked slowly but deliberately, and I took comfort in knowing that the full truth was being addressed, that the dangerous network was being dismantled, and that my husband could no longer pose a threat. I also began thinking about the future. What would family life look like now? How could I ensure that my child felt safe and secure without the weight of past betrayal? I focused on routines, communication, and trust building. Every small decision, where to go, how to spend time, what rules to establish, was guided by the lessons I had learned from the months of secrecy, observation, and careful preparation. Even small victories mattered. Grocery shopping without fear, quiet afternoons at the park, school events attended without anxiety, all became signs that life could be normal again. The $6,000, once a symbol of danger and betrayal, was now a distant memory. Its significance had shifted from fear to motivation, a reminder that vigilance, careful planning, and decisive action could protect those we love most. I found strength in reflection. Each decision I had made, the observation, the investigation, the careful legal preparation, was validated by the safety and stability we now enjoyed. I realized that courage is often quiet, meticulous, and deliberate, rather than dramatic or impulsive. Protecting my child had required patience, intelligence, and the willingness to act decisively when the moment arrived. In the months after the divorce, every day became a careful exercise in rebuilding life while maintaining vigilance. I paid attention to the small routines, understanding that the ordinary moments were now crucial for security and stability. Preparing our child's backpack each morning became deliberate. Only school supplies, lunch, and favorite toys. Nothing secret, nothing hidden. Each small act reinforced a sense of safety, a quiet reassurance that the past danger could not return. I also focused on emotional recovery. I allowed myself moments of reflection, understanding that the betrayal I had experienced was deep and layered. There were times when anger surfaced, and moments when fear threatened to overwhelm me. I handled these moments quietly, writing notes in a journal, and consulting trusted friends for guidance. I realized that reclaiming peace required intentional effort, establishing boundaries, creating routines, and ensuring that our child felt safe in every interaction. Life slowly regained rhythm. School drop-offs, afternoon playdates, and evening bedtime routines became the structure that anchored our days. Our child thrived in this new environment, adjusting quickly to the absence of their father and the safe predictability I now provided. Their laughter returned, unconstrained by the tension and hidden danger that had once accompanied every Monday morning. Each smile, each question, each moment of innocent curiosity reinforced why I had acted so decisively. Financial independence became another pillar of stability. With the accounts fully secured, I carefully managed our household, budgeting for necessities, saving for the future, and planning for contingencies. Every transfer, every investment, every step was deliberate. I had learned that preparation and control were essential, not just for survival during the crisis, but for long-term stability afterward. The legal aftermath continued quietly but decisively. Law enforcement followed up on the evidence provided by the private investigator investigating the network my husband had been involved in. I participated carefully, providing clarification and documentation, always mindful of protecting our child from exposure or fear. The investigation moved forward without disruption, and I could take solace in knowing that the dangerous operation was being dismantled. Social dynamics shifted as well. Friends and family reacted in varied ways. Some were supportive, understanding the gravity of the situation and the necessity of my actions. Others were skeptical, questioning why I had acted in secrecy, why I had filed for divorce so abruptly, or why I had involved the authorities. I handled these conversations carefully, choosing words that emphasized the safety of our child and the responsibility I had to act. Over time, understanding grew among those who mattered most, while the opinions of others mattered less. Small victories marked progress. Grocery trips felt calmer, walks in the park were leisurely rather than tense, and school events became enjoyable again. Even ordinary chores, laundry, cooking, organizing, took on new significance as symbols of stability and safety. Each day, the memory of the $6,000 and the betrayal it represented became a lesson in vigilance and courage rather than a source of fear. I also focused on preparing our child for the future. I emphasized the importance of honesty, awareness, and careful judgment in their own actions. Without introducing fear, I taught lessons about trust, attention to detail, and the value of observing carefully before acting. These lessons were drawn from experience, quietly integrated into daily routines, and became part of the foundation of resilience I wanted to instill. Even the quiet moments were important. Sitting together in the living room, reading books, preparing simple meals, or taking short walks around the neighborhood became opportunities to reinforce safety, trust, and connection. Each small act of normalcy was an antidote to the chaos that had once infiltrated our lives. I realized that protection was not only about legal and financial measures, it was about creating a stable, loving environment where our child could thrive without fear.